let's get people in. So we'll open the meeting at 7:08 with a roll call. I don't see Jean. Mike Barclay, I see your name. Oh, there's Jean. Why don't I see Jean on my screen?
Don't get your cat out of there.
Chris?
Working on it.
Okay. Well, Jean Estino's disembodied digital hand is raised, so I'm going to take that as a preliminary indication that she's here. Mike, if you can unmute, I've got a quick question. Yeah.
Rob, I just promoted her, so we should be good.
Good. There she is. Jean?
Present.
Good evening. Present. Excellent. Mike Barclay? Can you hear it? Mike? We'll come back. Mark Cameron?
Present.
Mark, are you, just so that our record is clear, have you been sworn in yet?
Yes, I did it yesterday.
Excellent. I need to ask Mike that as well. I think he's traveling though. Fran Collins?
Present.
Diane Kennedy? Diane Kennedy's cat?
Yes.
Uh,
Omnipresent.
Mark Maggi?
Present. I do have to be off by 9 for bedtime with a traveling wife, so hopefully we're done in an hour and 50 minutes.
Efficiency's always been our hallmark, so
Yes.
we'll do our best. Mary McGoldrick?
Present.
Meg Wheeler?
Present.
And Rob Hillman, I too am present. Mike, can you hear me? Well, once he's
I can.
yeah. Your audio is very indistinct. Hopefully you'll be able to. I can't make out what you're saying.
Sitting in the airport.
Oh, there you go.
I don't know. Reception's not great, so I'll try to hang in there for the next hour as best as I can.
There he is. Okay. Did you get sworn yet, Mike? Yeah, this is talking to Mike is like talking on the internet in
But yeah, I didn't
2007.
get the letter till Friday afternoon, and I've been gone.
That's what I thought. Then you can participate to the extent you're able. You just can't vote, and obviously we don't need you to make quorum. So hang in there. Hopefully, if you want to pitch in, you'll have enough connection to do so. Chris, can you give us the speed read version of where the warrant articles are at in terms of various committee actions? And I'll for those of you who haven't noticed, your inboxes this afternoon got the current version of the warrant. That would be the draft as of 10/3/23. That's the one that's still warm from the printer. So Chris, you want to give us a quick update?
Sure. So the warrant language is in front of you, with the exception of zoning, which is not in there yet. They're having their final meeting tonight, planning boards. So once that vote takes place, that language should be popped into the warrant. The other warrant articles are pretty much done now. So you have the what I would call the procedural ones up front, and we can talk through those if you'd like. You have CPC. To the best of my knowledge, they've not completed work. They voted for projects. Those are all in front of you there. The select board has finished finalizing the language of the warrant. So all the language you see now before you is council vetted. Again, with the exception of the zoning materials. The school committee is also voting tonight on the 2 articles affecting them. So I expect they'll vote to recommend them. And the select board is, again, finalized the rest of that language. So what you have in front of you again, is the warrant. And the motions, for those who are questioning how those would work, the motions for the vast majority of these will pretty much just reference what's in the warrant. The actual dollar figures for town hall and police will be in the motion. Again, we're working with a $10 million number for town hall, One Pleasant, and a $10.4 million number for public safety, the police building at 135 King. We just, I wanted to take into account with council exactly how we treat the CPC contribution, all of that. So we have an accurate number for the actual bond authorization for November 13th. But so we're still working with the same numbers we've talked about. Nothing's changed. If anything, the number on town hall will come down. So based on some of your votes, if you take them tonight, the select board is going to vote next Tuesday on a number of things. Planning board votes tonight. Capital's in their process. They've had a lot of conversation. I don't know if they voted on anything yet. Somebody can update us if they know more than I. So again, I think everything's in final form now, except for the zoning, which you're not going to take up until afterwards.
That's correct. Okay, if the select board is going to be doing their voting next Tuesday and we're not meeting till Wednesday, I think we should make an effort, since they at least generally state that our opinion informs that board's opinion, that we should vote on those things that we're comfortable voting on this evening. Certainly all of the routine motions, articles 1 through 4 or 5, depending on how they get they're not, well, 1 through 4 and possibly the CPC article as well. So if we can vote on any of these capital items, if we're at a place where people think that's a reasonable thing to do, then we should do it. Certainly not the stabilization fund, since we're not even going to be taking them up in any kind of detail until next week. So Diane?
Just a quick question on, has capital voted on any of the capital items? Like the buildings that we're going to be discussing tonight?
Not as far as I know.
Okay.
I was watching their meeting earlier today, but I didn't watch till the end. So
Yeah. I
Chris,
watched
do you
part
know?
of it.
Chris might be able to let us know when he gets back on. I think.
Yeah,
walking
I don't
from his-
think. I'm sorry. I'm just a disembodied voice for the moment. I don't think they voted on anything to be. I mean, they've had lots of conversation. I mean, I think the CPC stuff is really now that's presented. That's all that's bundled up now, and that wrapped up the recreational facilities ask. So that's all done. I know they're still having conversation about the funds and the buildings. So I know they're working to try to get to a recommendation before the warrant closes, and if they can, it'll just be in the motions.
Okay. So with that said, if we have guests waiting, why don't we move to the public safety and town hall uses? That'll take up the larger part of our meeting. I understand that there are developments in the Fields Park recreational proposals that sort of change the complexion of them a little bit. We'll take them up after this. But so Chris, who do we got? And let's hear some things and ask some questions.
So you have in front of you now Chief Quigley, Chief Doc Gray, and Glenn Pratt, who I think can walk you through any questions, or if you so. Would you like to make a I think you have all the materials that I sent you all, right? So you have all the links, all the one pagers, all the videos, and any other materials that exist to this point. No PNSs on there. If anyone has any overall questions, I can answer them. Otherwise, I think the chiefs are available to answer or to present. I mean, I think they're all available to give you a short update from their perspective, including Glenn, as to what the building would do and how it would work for them in the long run. With an understanding that this building, unlike Town Hall, is not ready. We are using it for temporary space, but it would have to be acquired and then designed and then renovated. So the ask is for two parts. It's to purchase the building at 2.4. It's to renovate it up to standards, including all the things that the chiefs will talk to you about. And this is 135 King. As a police headquarters and a fire, I guess I'll call it a substation rather than a secondary station, because the main fire headquarters will remain on Elm Street, and there'll be renovations at Elm Street to allow them to do more work at that site. So I think the chiefs and Glenn are available to answer your questions.
So before we ask them to start, I have seen a number of preliminary presentations, the video clips, some live presentations. I was present at a workshop. What level of presentation does anybody on the committee, and feel free to ask for things you want to know, but what level of presentation would you like, or do you want to just jump right in with specific questions? Anybody? Hearing none. Chiefs, perhaps we'll start with Chief Quigley. Assume that we've got the contours of it pretty well down. Maybe give us the 2-minute version, and then where members of the committee have specific areas of interest, they can follow up with questions. I know you've given pretty robust descriptions of what the needs are and how this parcel and this building and the renovation meet those needs. Maybe just the thumbnail sketch, and then we'll get it into whatever level of detail people think is appropriate. Chief?
Sure. Thank you for having me tonight. Just the 10,000 foot overview of this. The current police station was built in 1961. We've been there over 50 years. We did an addition, or we did a remodel in 1990. We did an addition in 2002, 2003, and now 21 years later, we're trying to come up with solutions because we've just outgrown the space. Besides outgrowing the space, we have the regulations have moved beyond us with regard to running a cell block. Every year the state comes in and does an inspection of the cells, and every year we get written up. They've written us up probably for the past 5 years, and we're to the point where if we have an issue, someone hurts themselves in one of those cells, we're going to have some real risk there as far as liability. In order to fix that, I'm not sure we can do what they need us to do in the existing footprint. It's going to require a complete rebuild of the booking area in the cell block. We'd have to blow a wall into the driveway, and I'm not sure we have the room to do it. We've already decommissioned the entire police garage. One bay is for evidence. We had to make a modern evidence room. You probably read about what happened in Braintree a few years ago. Those major issues with the evidence. We were sort of in the same boat, although nothing was missing, but it wasn't being properly housed to the standard that we have today. So the bottom line is we're out of room. We've done everything we can to utilize the space that's there, including decommissioning 3 garage bays, and now we've moved outside the footprint of the building. We're utilizing a Quonset hut that we built during COVID to store equipment and keep things that need to be held out of the weather. 135 King Street presented itself as an option this summer, and I think it's a viable option. I think it's a smart option, and we're looking for the support of the committee. Everything's moved very quickly, but it is doable, and it appears the price is right. So with that, I can just open it up to questions.
I think that makes sense. We'll just start with who has their hands up first. Diane?
Yeah, just a question. I'm just looking at my notes from before. So you're seeking $10 million and 2.5 is for the actual purchase, which frankly sounds like a no-brainer to me. I'm just wondering if there's building contingencies in the remaining amount of money, knowing that, as you go into renovation, the cost might be more than 7.5 or whatever the math is.
Yeah, I know Michelle has been working closely with the architect and we're waiting for, it's sort of, what came first, the chicken or the egg? So we don't have the money to have the actual drawings done right now. But I've had extensive meetings with the architect and the engineers, and it appears that it is doable for that amount of money. And like you said, I believe it's 2.4 on the purchase of the building, and the rest is the upfit, a retrofit, I guess.
I can just jump in. It's 6 million, Diane, for the retrofit, and a 2 million contingency. It's a really big contingency because of the uncertainty.
That's the answer I was looking for. Thank you.
Fran?
Does that number cover the addition for the fire truck and the ambulance and whatever housing or office space they need?
I'll let Chris answer that. I believe it does, but we're calling it like an annex or a garage, or an outlying garage for the fire apparatus. But maybe Chris, Chief Dockeray, can speak to that.
Chris or Chief Doctor, go ahead.
So the answer again is that yes, it's being designed for both. This will be the primary police headquarters, but it'll be a 2-bay, and Chief Doctor can explain the operations better than I can. But it's a 2-bay secondary station that would most likely house an ambulance and an engine, but it would have all the other support facilities for the regular operations. While it's likely to only be used in the daytime, it's going to be designed for 24-hour use. Again, whether we need it right away or not, it would be designed for that. So that's what's being vetted and designed now. And then Fran, we'll see what the bids come back at, right?
Okay.
Mark, I see your hands up. Mark Maggi.
Yeah, thanks. I just worry that contingency that high is going to make this thing dead on arrival in terms of how it's perceived by the public. Is there anything being done to socialize this plan within the community? Because unfortunately, this town has shown an inability to approve large projects over the past few years, and a number that big with so many questions attached to it, I worry is going to just doom it. And I support it, for the record. I'm just trying to get ahead of things.
We've had, you've seen the work we've put in. We're going to continue socializing this and getting the word out about it. Again, it's tough coming up with solid numbers because we don't have actual plans drawn. So I think it's sort of a belt and suspenders type thing.
I understand that, and maybe I'm overstepping my bounds as a member of the advisory committee. If I am, I apologize, but the socializing effort, it's got to be more robust. It has to be at the soccer fields on a Saturday morning. It's got to be at the Little League fields. People need to know about this because if they hear this big of a number with a question mark attached to it for the first time at town meeting, I don't think this thing stands a chance, unfortunately.
I agree with you.
Just briefly, Mark, for the record, we have no bounds as the advisory committee. Our power is zero, but our persuasive authority is endless. So, and those are important points for us to make. Our job is to advise town meeting and to say that town meeting needs this sort of information ahead of time in order to make an informed decision. It's right in our wheelhouse. Thanks for saying it, but I assure you that this is what we do. So I saw Diane, then Jean.
No, Mary had her hand up.
I saw Mary, then Jean. Go ahead. Sorry. Thank you, Diane.
That's all right. I guess I have a real concern about backing the renovation of a building into a number. And some of it is echoing what Mark has said. I don't know if anyone can say if we'll be any closer at town meeting than we are now in terms of a budget for the renovation, but I think that's a real concern. The other question I have is there was some conversation earlier on just about the grade, the difference from 3A to entering that building. And I don't know if one of the chiefs could talk about that, especially with the fire trucks, I would think.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me this evening. Yeah, no, that grade is fine for us. We tested it with the ambulance in the video. Looking at that grade looks like a better grade than we have here in Elm Street. So I'm not concerned about the grade at all.
Okay.
For apparatus to enter 3A and exit 3A.
Thank you.
It's no concern on the police part.
Okay.
Gene?
Do we already have the equipment that we're going to need to stock, for lack of a better term, the substation? Do we already have an ambulance and a ladder in place that will just move from Elm Street there?
Yes, we already have the ambulance and we already have an engine. We're not moving a ladder truck up there, just the ambulance and engine.
Okay.
Yep.
Diane?
Yeah, so, one thing to address all of these concerns, I mean, one of my original concerns was, first of all, let me say that this 3A location has been a possible aspirational site for a public safety building since the 70s. So, and I think that the $2.5 million purchase price is kind of a no-brainer in my mind. One of the things I thought was, well, should we be going to town meeting, special town meeting in November and asking them for the purchase price and engineering to get us to construction drawings like we do with other projects, and then coming back in the spring for the actual build out with a real number. It's just a strategy maybe to get us where we need to be. The other piece of this is, and correct me if I'm wrong, in reading the financial planning working group document, it says for $10.4 million, buy and convert it into new police fire annex. I actually think it should be spelled out a little differently, which is purchase the building and get to construction drawings and renovate. And if we don't need a full $10 million, let's say we get the authorization at this town meeting, then we're not going to borrow the full $10.4 million, in which case it would be less money per average taxpayer. Is that right, Chris? This is just authorization to borrow up to for the purpose of, or am I wrong?
No, you're correct, Diana. It's authorization to borrow. We obviously wouldn't borrow all of that right up front. The select board's conversation about this was, look, and I think it was a broader conversation was, hey, we don't want to give people half the, play a bait and switch game and say, oh, we're buying it for this, but we're not going to tell you how much it's going to cost. So the board said, can we do this for a maximum of, $10 million or so all in, that 10, which is an 8 million, and the consultant said yes, and that's what they're designing to, right? And by the way, it's not like Bill's now going to get jail cells made out of paper mache, right? I mean, there are things in there they're going to have to be in there no matter what. Does it mean that there's going to be a high-tech sauna in there? No. Will there be a cooking channel level kitchen for the fire department? No. In fact, there may only be one kitchen in the facility for both police and fire. I'm sure it'll be a radical thing, and we may get TV shows talking about that. So but you're right, Diane. It'll be, the first spend will be design, and then basically a year from then, when we actually get the bids done, that's when we borrow the rest of the money.
Mark? Maggie? We have 2 Marks now.
Sorry about that.
No.
Is there any, can we do anything to say, we're asking for this much in comparison to what option B would cost? A lot of what doomed the town hall project 6 months ago was the overall cost and what people thought we didn't need. So this number, I understand we're asking for a maximum, right? And obviously there's going to be fear that, well, you give any level of government an open checkbook and they're going to figure out a way to spend every dollar in that checking account. And I think we can heed that off. But is there do we have any plan to say, you know, this is the opportunity cost of not doing this?
Well, I think in the one-page summaries that have been circulated, there's examples of what other communities have already spent, right? Hingham is spending almost 50, or actually more than $50 million. And while they do have a bigger department than we do, it's not like they're the size of Boston, right? So they're spending $50 million on the building going up next to Fresh Market. And Situate spent, I don't have that sheet in front of me, I think 16 or 20 or something like that, right?
16, Chris. Yep.
And that was 5 or 6 years ago. And costs have accelerated since then. So the other reality is that we have to do something about the police station with the cells. I mean, it's just we're in violation, and we're not going to be able to hold any prisoners, which is, it's kind of hard, right? if you have to arrest people, you have to hold them. You can't just keep them in the car overnight, right? So you know, and that station cannot be. We had the folks in. And the folks from Castle Booze, the consultant, said you can't do anything here. It's just not going to work. I think Chief could be more eloquent about it than I. And the other side of it is this things we're not doing on the fire side, right? We don't have a dedicated decontamination area. What that is a safely secured cleaning area, so that if they come back from a fire, they can clean their gear. If they come back from a challenging medical call, they can clean their gear, right? And they have the equipment to do that. It's in the basement. And as Chief Dockery, I think we'll be happy to explain to you, there's been water leaks and sewage backups down there. It's not a good place to do it. Plus, they have other equipment. It's not just the equipment they wear. There's other things that have to be cleaned. Right now, they do it in the bay or out in the back. Not really the way they'd like to do it. And plus, they don't have any. There's not enough space. So the opportunity cost, Mark, is we don't have a department. Either department will be able to run effectively at all. I mean, that's what we're down to. And I think that both chiefs can speak to that much more eloquently than I. And that's not even touching emergency management. So.
No, that's more than sufficient. I appreciate it. I just think that needs to be made resoundingly clear.
Yeah, so I see Diane, Mary, and then I'd like to loop Glenn Pratt in to talk about the emergency management part of this project. So
I'll yield
Mary?
my time to Mary.
Always a good policy. Mary?
Just very quickly, because we're going to be getting this raw, and it will need to be completely renovated, we'll have to hire at prevailing wage to do that, right? That'll be how that bid goes out. Okay.
Yes, we have to be in all state requirements in this one.
I think that's also something that should be differentiated from the town hall project. I mean, there's some, and I think people have heard enough about that over the last 5 to 7 years. I think they get it.
If I could just jump in, I'm not sure that's entirely true. Smart people who I've spoken with who are, you know, oriented to public affairs, if not quite as much as people who sit on this committee or other committees, but you know, really, you know, your core town meeting attendees and participants, you know, asked a smart question. If, you know, you can put up that building for $9 million, why don't we hire that contractor? And but a 2-minute description of public procurement law, and they instantly got it. But I think that those are the cases. To Mark's point, Maggie's point, that's part of creating informed voters, and why these numbers are what they are and what they mean is important. So I think we can assume nothing, but I don't think we need to. I think you're right. There's a general familiarity with it that, you know, bright people are going to get that right away. Sometimes it's a reminder, sometimes it's a new fact, but they will get it right away. Anybody else before we get to Mary?
Just a real quick point. The project briefs are great for each of these projects. I don't see any square footage on the 135 property. So if that could be added at some point or discussed, that would be helpful, I think.
So we're actually getting very kind of basic sketches for the police and fire with square footage. And we should have those shortly. It's just we have the one for fire. We don't have the one for police yet.
Okay, just speak for the people that are gonna do the square foot costs in their head.
Right, and if I remember the rough numbers, Bill, it's about 8,000 square feet for police, something like that. Is that about right?
I think we're operating in, I think, 6,000 square feet at Elm Street, if that. And I think it's going up to, we're looking at 135 will be somewhere around 12.
Okay, thank you.
And there's about 6 for fire, and some of that may actually combine, so it may not be that much. I think there's gonna be some shared facilities.
Mark, Cameron?
Just one note on the $8 million portion for the engineering renovation. It might be helpful for those individuals to see that expanded. Not necessarily, I don't want to say detail, because I don't think that people need to get too deep into the weeds there at this level, but understanding the level of engineering, design, construction, and contingency might be helpful, so that there's a big difference between 5, 10, 20, 30% contingency, or even 50% contingency, that and there's reasons why you carry different amounts of contingency at this level, where it's again conceptual, if you will. You would carry a much higher design set of contingency versus when you have a set of plans. So right now, that you really can't get that information anywhere, from what I see.
Diane?
Sorry. Yeah, just in terms of messaging, and I can't find my one sheet on this particular property, but some of the things that should be listed, instead of renovating this great building and what a deal it is, really should be the fact that our jail cells aren't to code, that we will be able to create a decontamination. I mean, those are the things that are going to resonate with people, probably even more so than the numbers. The numbers are going to be important from the impact on their individual tax dollars, I think. But I think the more we can say, these are the things we need, and this is going to be the opportunity that we have with this building, I think that'll help out.
Fran?
I think that as I look at that 135 King Street, it's a 2-story building. Are we all set on ADA access and stuff? We're gonna put an elevator in. It looks to me like to put in a garage on which would be that'll be the north side of the building, I guess. There'd be a fair amount of excavation to be done to make room for a garage. It's built into the side of a bank inside of a hill there. Have we looked at all of that stuff? Have we really taken a good sharp look? So do we know what we're going to have to spend? Or is this $10 million just, well, it looks pretty good to me? I'm not sure. And I think we need to have, to coin a phrase, all our ducks in a row there when we present this to the town meeting, because as Mark mentioned, this is going to be a tough sell. Not that it's not necessary, not needed, but it's going to be a tough sell.
There is, there will be, there's actually 3 floors there. It's hard to, you can't really tell. There's actually 3 floors. It's 3 floors.
3.
Yeah, you can't really tell from the front of the building, but it is. We will need an elevator for ADA, and the architects have assured us they could put garage bays or a sally port either behind the building, if they change the grade, or either on the north or south side.
So are there elevators in the building now?
They're not.
No. So that's going to exclude some people from coming to make a courtesy call.
Well, we'd have we'd have to add an elevator.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I just want to be sure that we've looked at every single contingency that we might come up with, and say, gee, do we have money for that? And have we funded enough for all this stuff? It can't come back in a few months and say, oh, geez, well, we forgot this and we forgot that. And I'm sure you haven't done it, but stranger things have happened.
Oh no, it's been a heavy lift, that's for sure. But we're trying to think of everything, and this meeting is very helpful as well. I am writing things down that you guys are bringing up.
Okay.
Glenn, do you want to talk to us a little bit about emergency management?
Oh, yes. Good evening, everyone. Emergency management, our world is to coordinate resources and be a central point for response to incidents. And the location that that's done in our business is from an emergency operations center. We have, over the last 12 years, built out a center in the basement of Deer Hill School, which has served us okay. But we don't have a backup to that. So we're in the business of backing people up and supporting them, and we have nowhere to go if we're offline. We operate in a location that has no water, no bathroom facilities. We have to go up into the school, which does not work if school's in session very well. We are now, as it's turned out, we share our space with the Boy Scouts facility, the facilities department, and the recreation summer camp. So even though we're a good part of the community and we realize we're all on the same team, some of the equipment and materials and information we have in the EOC shouldn't be available for Boy Scout meetings and recreation summer camp and those kind of things. So getting a more secure location would be very good for us. The other thing too is that when an incident is going on, we need to be in close proximity to the major departments that are responding, which are usually public safety, and we're not. One of the things, our EOC does have the capability to replicate anything that can be done in the police and fire station as far as radios, communications, and IT. However, transferring some of the secure police data files to the EOC in an emergency does not give any of us a comfortable feeling. So those are some of the issues that would go away if we all can get into the same place. During the COVID years, we learned how important space is and an EOC is, because we worked every day on the incident, and kind of like as an island. So being where the other people are is important to us. And I think this could be the solution. And the old EOC could be our backup. So now we're backing up people and we have a place to back up ourselves. So we think it's a good move.
Questions for Glenn? Questions generally? Mark, Cameron.
How would the backup at Deer Hill operate with the space that's shared with the Boy Scouts and facilities down there? I haven't been down there enough ever to be familiar with how that's set up. So in the event that becomes emergency management's backup, how does that stay? It still needs to be secure even as a backup, right? So
right, but it would be no less secure then than it is now. So we wouldn't be any worse off. We certainly wouldn't disconnect any of our radios or antennas, those kind of things.
Do the two spaces overlap down there, or are they just adjacent to each other?
They're all adjacent. The Boy Scouts use our space for certain of their functions and training and those kind of things. The other spaces that are shared with facilities and recreation summer camp, it's just whoever can muscle their way in first, and it gets kind of awkward sometimes. But the biggest thing is the biggest thing is having a permanent place to operate as a primary location, and then this being a secondary location is a non-issue.
Would there be any thought to having this be the prime, 3A being the primary and having the secondary on Elm Street if the police department's vacating that space and being adjacent to the fire department there?
Yeah, we talk about that often, and we think that the likelihood of the public safety facility being offline is more probable than something up on top of Deer Hill when you talk about flooding and those kind of things like that. So we've never been too keen on building out a portion of that Elm Street building as our secondary location. And of course, it's a space problem there too now, which it may not be as we go forward, but we don't see that as a good location.
And just to be clear, because it's an area I have some personal knowledge in, the Boy Scouts area is adjacent to the emergency management area. Our back exit, our emergency exit, is through that space. Glenn and his committee is generous to let us use the space for very limited purposes. We only use it for meetings, and there are never scouts in there without more than one adult. So in case anybody's wondering whether shenanigans are occurring. Well, they aren't even in our own space, but there's certainly extra care taken for that space, and we're grateful for it. But we don't use it that much, and we don't store anything in there.
Right.
It's all
and
fair
Rob
to
is
say,
right.
Glenn?
Yeah, he's right. And there's never been an incident. And one of the reasons we like to do it is because we hope to interest some of the younger scouts into getting involved in emergency management and helping us during emergencies, to doing things like run the radios and clerical things like that. And also, you know, we need strong backs to move stuff a lot too. So
they're
that's
always
covered.
at your
Right.
always at your service, Glenn.
Right.
I guarantee.
Thank
So
you.
Mary and then Diane.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, how many square feet do you have down in Deer Hill? And then what would you be seeking on 135 King?
Well, certainly, what a big portion of our space is shared meeting room space, where we convene different departments in an emergency that's going on. So that's a shared space, which would normally be built into the public safety police building anyway. But we probably need to have a secure area and administrative space of 600 to 700 feet.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Just two quick questions. One is the in the total cost being proposed, is any of that to then renovate Elm Street? You know, and I know these projects don't happen overnight, but eventually, if most of the operations are moving up to King Street for police, for example, what's going to happen to Elm Street?
So the plan is, so what's been assessed, and I think, John, you've met with the architects and the engineer folks too, about the fire needs. So one of the things that's being looked at, Diane, is how fire can kind of take some of the space the police would leave, and, you know, expand their operations space. They don't have any private meeting space. They need space for fire safety. They need space for training. They need space for you know, the guys, the firefighters, I should say, to you know, to function in their 24-hour operations, and they need decontamination space. So the part of this conversation is how that would work. I think John can answer more.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Chris. Yeah, we need to get out of the basement here at 44 Elm Street. We've had two major sewer backups, and they weren't we didn't cause them. They were caused by a pipe that runs next to the fire station. So we've had to remove stuff out of there, take up office space here to make storage area. And so obviously we can move the rest of our stuff, especially our decontamination equipment, out of the basement. And then we'd have some meeting space here too. And one of the issues too is we don't have any female locker rooms. So we'd be able to use the female locker room that's already established in the police station next door. So those are some of the benefits and some of the things we need to do when and if the police do move out of Elm Street.
Just for clarification, and Chief Dockery, don't go away because my next question is for you. But just for clarification, are the costs of the work that is being projected for Elm Street in this particular number? Is that something that's a year or two away?
I think so, if there's any, the answer is yes, and there'll also be some of that will just be in the regular, you know, facilities operating plans, because some of it may be as simple as, you know, moving some walls or, you know, that kind of stuff.
Great.
And again, then there might be some space left. The bays, you know, that the police used to have or still have, might become facilities. We're not really sure what would happen there because you can't use them for fire purposes. They're pretty tiny. So I think that, you know, we'd see if we can't stretch the space a little bit further, and possibly, by the way, repurpose some of the parking there to be able to support downtown. But that's, you know, once we're done.
And then my other question, and forgive me if I've asked this before in this forum, because I've been trying to listen to meetings, but Chief Dockery, in terms of any apparatus that's up on King Street with the new proposed building, would there be any additional men and women power that is needed?
No, so right now our manpower staff, no, we would not need to hire any additional ones. We are trying to run 6 during the day, so that'll allow us to deploy 2 individuals up onto 3A. So yeah, no need to add any additional staff.
All right. Anything further for the chiefs or Glenn? Hearing none. Thank you, all three of you. We appreciate it. That plus all the other material we've had, I think gives us a solid foundation for what we need to do. And I concur with my colleagues' suggestions about how to, help provide an informed electorate. I think once folks know, there'll be different opinions, but I think the whole effort in this town meeting with all the various proposals is to provide as much data as possible to the town meeting voters and voters at a subsequent ballot, which is A, it's our job, and B, I think when there's a perception that hasn't been the case, it's been negatively commented upon. So we appreciate it. Thank you very much. We'll if we need to know anything further, we'll ask, but have a good evening otherwise.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So that brings us to bringing on some discussion of town hall. Chris, who do we have for questions about the town hall proposal?
The moment it's me,
You, of
I
course.
was trying to get Michelle to join us tonight, but we're all like running around in 7 directions. So if she joins us momentarily, I will have her join me at this point.
Let me take us, but that's fine. Let me take a second then to kind of poll the committee. We've heard the discussion about, well, why don't we get through these two discussions when we get down to the warrant article, strike that, the agenda item having to do with consideration of these matters in the aggregate, then we'll consider whether to take votes on particular items at that point. That seems that it would make the most sense. So we've had some discussion about town hall. I'm sure that everyone on this committee has paid some attention to the masses of information that have been flying around, meetings, forums, the materials that were at the attachments that were circulated earlier in the week. I'm sure everybody has lots of questions too. So I'm not sure that we need even as much of an overview as we got from the chiefs on this one. I think we're aware that the select board assigned a P&S for 1 Pleasant. I think everyone is aware that that was an opportunity that presented itself not very long ago. While there was, I talked about it last week for those of you who are here and stayed awake, that there were an ongoing look at some other potential space for town hall functions, and this became available. So there have been lots of detailed discussions. There have been some general discussions as well. Why don't we just start with questions, unless anybody feels the need for seeing none.
Wait a minute.
Fran?
Yeah. The completion of 1 Pleasant Street. Now, initially, it was going to be retail downstairs and residential apartments on the 2nd and 3rd floor. And the 2nd and 3rd floor has not changed at all. But the downstairs configuration is going to change substantially to build offices in lieu of retail establishments. How does that, I think we talked about this before, but I don't know that we ever found out is it a fact or not. How is that going to look in light of the procurement laws, federal, state procurement laws? Are we sort of trying to circumvent to make an end run out of prevailing wage on that downstairs build out? Are we safe on that? I guess that's my question.
Chris,
So,
I think that's been discussed in my presence, but I'll let you answer it.
Yeah, so that's so Fran, we've talked with council, and the fact is that this was being retrofitted for tenants, right? That there was going to be some office in there, some retail. There was even going to be a restaurant, right? That was the plan. So there was already retrofitting going on. So all they've really had to do is to kind of move some walls. The bathrooms are already being spotted. And they were near completion for all intents and purposes. So the things that were not going to go in there normally, like vaults and the vestibule of town is procuring using official procurement practices, off-state contract, paying whatever wage needs to be paid, if prevailing wage applies. And so we're following those rules. I mean, the town had nothing to do with the design of this building and had nothing to do with none of that, right? So we really got it. We came into the picture really as it was baked and being finished. So again, based on conversations with council, and I think conversations that Michelle has had, I think we're good. We feel comfortable that we're okay. And the things that I mentioned are the things that we've had to add that are different, and we're going to follow, all the regular procurement rules for that.
I asked the question because we have some new members, and it just says a reiteration so that we're all aware of what's been done and that we're proceeding in the right direction.
Well, no, it's a good question.
Thank you.
Diane?
Yeah, I think many of my questions will come later when we talk about sort of all these projects in the aggregate and the general kind of baseline financial stability of the town. But a couple of things on One Pleasant. And Chris, I think you and I have talked about this, and I think everybody could benefit. Just in one of my biggest hesitations on this is just the housing and kind of understanding how it's going to be managed and how how the units were already kind of in our inventory, if you will, towards 40B. And so I just have some concerns about how these units in particular play with the, Affordable Housing Steering Committee and their goals and initiatives towards creating more housing in the community. So if you could address that issue, I'd appreciate it. And then my second question is similarly to the earlier question about on King Street, Elm Street, which is, I think we have to be honest with people that we still have a very large building that is in very serious disrepair at 41 Highland Ave. And a good chunk of that and a good chunk of the money that was being proposed in the various iterations of renovation was restoration costs for the old town hall. So I think we just have to be as upfront as we can be with taxpayers, knowing that is a project that we can't turn our backs on. We cannot let 41 Highland Ave turn blighted, and in order to not do that, it's going to cost a lot of money. In the $10 million range is my best guess, just based on what I know over the last couple of years of studies. So thanks.
So I'll take your second one first. So the select board has said publicly that obviously there has to be ongoing planning, right, for that structure. And for starters, it will continue to be an operation for elections. It will still be critical swing space. For example, 135 gets approved, it gets designed. Right now we have detectives. We're leasing it for detectives. We're actually putting records in there that were in the basement of the library that cannot go down there any longer. So we're gonna have to put those somewhere else while 135 King is being renovated. So they would come to 41 Highland. And should there be any work at the schools and they need a little swing space for administration or something, that would be another possibility. So one of the things the town has none of is the ability for swing space, any space to, temporary space that's ours. So I think the building would most certainly serve that. At the same time, there's an opportunity to do some targeted renovation because there's nobody in there, right? On an ongoing basis, at least for periods of time. So facilities might be able to, and other contractors might be able to tackle some of these projects that you couldn't do with people in the building, right? And the assessments have been done, right, Diane? We understand some of the real problems, particularly on the historic side. So that said, a bigger, broader plan will come once there's a decision made of whether, as to whether or not 1 Pleasant is the answer. If it's not the answer, then, you know, what's the, you know, there's a different set of questions that have to be asked. If it is the answer, clearly there has to be ongoing conversations. That said, there's still a budget for it to maintain it, right? That's not going anywhere. To pay utilities and, you know, hopefully be less of that. That's that one. On the other one, the affordable items, I see you, Gene. I think Rob sees you, right? You see Gene?
Yeah, I do. I'm
No,
just
she's
waiting
next.
for Chris to finish. Next.
You can put your hand down unless you want to have it up there. I think we got you.
Don't forget me.
I'm like Rob won't forget you. So in terms of housing, so the town is not a housing manager, so we'll have to hire a professional firm, and firms do this, right? We've been in contact with folks who do this and are interested in potentially managing the units. So, you know, the management will be handled by a professional management company that also has experience with affordable units, both managing them, but more importantly, vetting them properly and running the lotteries that are necessary, and, you know, checking the boxes with the state agencies. So we've been in contact. When I say we, I mean my office and others, with folks who are able to do that. Obviously we can't contract with anybody until we actually have the building. That said, that work is in progress. And in terms of, you know, the global management, and the select board is looking to have a big meeting with the Affordable Housing Steering Committee and the Affordable Housing Trust with the select board later this month to have a conversation about, you know, what's the best steps forward. I mean, what role can everybody play? The 13 units were in the plan, right? It's true, right? And so long as 4 of them are deeded affordable, big A affordable, all the rentals count. That said, the unique opportunity here is to make them small A affordable, ones that are, you know, not necessarily low mod income, but or meet the official requirements that say, but, you know, are more for, you know, folks who are maybe more working class, or, you know, whether they're town workers or, you know, people who work at Stop and Shop or Shaw's or a restaurant in town, right? Or maybe kids of residents who are just starting out, or residents who are trying to downsize, who are maybe on a fixed income. I mean, there's a lot of different options. I'm not going to be able to, I'm not an expert on how local preferences work, but they do exist. There's boxes you have to check, there's hoops you have to go through, but the other communities have done this, and done it successfully. So the select board has publicly talked about, you know, having those units as the small A affordables, right? The ones that there's still income restrictions, right? And there's still other restrictions. We could really fill a niche that isn't being filled right now, unless people are living at home with their parents or living with their kids in the reverse situation. Does that kind of answer your question, Diane? There's more to come, right? There's a lot more conversation. So,
Gene?
Okay, can you tell us whether or not there's been any precedent set in any other towns for mixed use with municipal and residential facilities combined? And what are the insurance implications of this?
So I was talking to counsel about the insurance implications today, and she goes, you know, it's really not any different than anything else. Sure, I mean, it's a little more complicated, but there's no more. It may seem like it's more of a risk, but it's, you know, there's a risk in any of our buildings at any time. There's a risk at the RTF if somebody getting hurt. There's a risk at the schools of kids getting hurt. The insurance will be a little bit different than some of our other structures because it's, you know, residential and because it's mixed use. That said, mixed use is insured all the time in the private sector, right? So it's not complicated. Maya may have to put us in a different kind of plan. We haven't, you know, gone deep into that yet. In terms of operations, I know there are other. I'm not aware of any in Massachusetts that have done this, so we could be first. But there are Hingham runs units, right? I mean, I was actually talking to Jen Orm, who used to work for us, right? She's now that one of her jobs in Hingham is managing their apartments that the town owns. And I'm not talking about the housing authority; they own other apartments, right? So that are run. So other other places, some of our neighbors have them. They're not co-located with offices necessarily, but, you know, the units are completely segregated. Just to be clear, right? The access to them is different. You can't get to the second floor from the first floor, and you can't get to the first floor from the second floor, right? And there's an elevator corridor. The residential entrances will be in the back. The business entrance is in the front, which is the way it was planned anyway for if it was going to be a purely commercial building. Does that kind of answer your question, Gene? Okay.
I'll be interested to see how it plays out though, once you have more concrete information.
No, I look at it's definitely it's different, right? It's definitely a different proposal. I think we're excited, and I think there's going to be things that we'll learn for sure.
Brian?
Yeah, the whoever you hire to be the property manager, they will manage and maintain, is that correct? We're not gonna have the town facilities people in there wallpapering and fixing toilets and.
Well, if you're volunteering, Fran, I can put you on the list, but no, we're going to have a management company do that stuff, right? We don't plan to have our facilities team do that. Now, when I say that, that's for the individual units.
So the property manager will be in charge of maintenance as well. Huh?
That's the plan,
All right.
and our folks still maintain the outer structure and make sure that the roof and the walls and the windows.
Yeah, sure.
Right? And the elevator, we'll have to have a contract for that.
Thank you.
I see Rob disappear for a second, so I see you, Gene, so go ahead. If there it is in mind, I'll just call on you.
I'm just curious about this property manager. Can you give us kind of an idea of how that works, paying them? And would it become a town employee, or would it be just a service contract type of thing?
It was a service contract kind of thing. I'll give you an example. The Transit RH developments, they have affordable units, right? They have a company that manages those. Right? I mean, the owner doesn't manage the building. They have a company that does it. So there's companies that do this for all kinds of different buildings. And we've explored ones that already do work in Cohasset, because our units are managed in Cohasset. I mean, that's one of them. The TFD building. The 390 CJC, that there's a management for that too, because the owner doesn't manage the units. So there's definitely firms that do that work. Even the housing authorities, and our housing authorities manage that way now too. There's a contractor that does that work. It's kind of just a variation on what happens in the private sector all the time. I mean, where a firm manages the complex I happen to live in is managed by a management company, right? Then the owners don't have anything to do with the management; they just make the money. And then the company that manages units all over the country. Affordable housing tends not to be quite that broad; they're a little more regional. So the folks who would manage this would most likely be in the region, or at the very least in the state, who want to have a presence down here too. So, and again, we're going to have more information about this as we go further into the process. And we could probably try to share more information on what these do. I could probably send you all links to. There's a couple of state sites that have more information on this generally that might help answer your question. So let me get those links again and share them with Rob and share them with all of you, because I think it would help just understand, because most of us don't talk about this affordable housing aspects at all, right? We just talk about it in a more generic sense. But there's a lot of information out there that could talk about how these things work in a more general way. And some of the firms that do the management work, and I'm not saying we necessarily would use any one of them, but there's some sites already out there that explain the work, and that might help answer these questions.
Well, just like we spoke about with the public safety initiative, the more information that we have, the more questions we can answer for people in the community, the better off we'll all be. Just the people who have approached me about this, we all think it's a no-brainer. It's a brand new building, and obviously the other one will become somewhat of a liability, particularly if we don't address that. So I have some thoughts on how that could happen, but it's too soon to even think of that.
Okay, Mary?
Yeah, a couple questions, and if it's better to talk about this later on, that's totally fine. I'm curious, and this might be a Jennifer question or Chris, how much money we carry in the operating budget just for repairs and upkeep for 41 Highland?
About $100,000.
Okay. And then
that's their budget for overall maintenance of the building, roughly.
Okay.
That's less utilities, that's all that stuff. Right?
Alrighty. And then in terms of, looking at Article 7, and CPC funding, and especially project number 4, borrowing from future CPA receipts. I mean, that's theoretically something that could be done for the historic portion of the town hall. What, you know, what that might look like. I'm concerned that we're adding 8,000 square feet of office space, which is needed, and I totally believe in, and this is an opportunity, without a little more definition on what's going to happen, especially to the annex. You know, does that need to, Mark probably knows this, does that need to stay there so that the historic building doesn't fall down, at least on one side? You know, just a little bit more fleshing out there, because it costs money to demo a building too. And I realize that that's probably a couple of years away if that happens.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we're several years down the road from anything major happening at 41 Highland, because that has to be a real plan, right? And I think the community has to have a conversation about what it wants to do with the site. And that said, it's not going to be abandoned, right? I mean, we're going to still have a presence there actively, at the very least with elections and other things. Plus, as you know, if we're going to need to move detectives and others in there, so we're going to have to maintain the building. And we're going to have to keep it heated and cool, well, cool to the extent that can be cooled. And you know, make sure the plumbing works and electrical and all that stuff. So all the systems will be worked. By the way, a quick aside to go back to Gene. Bill Cooley just texted me that the Boston Fire does public-private partnerships, and they actually rent space from some of their headquarters from private companies.
Who does?
So
I'm sorry, I didn't
Boston
catch.
Fire Department does. So you have like firehouses in buildings, right? So there's you know, that you find that a lot more in the cities than in towns, right? You have to, the fire station on the first floor, people living upstairs or offices upstairs, right? And again, now that I think about it, I've seen that. I've seen places like that, right? So do you want me to? Do you need more? Did I finish my answer for you, Mary? I mean, the truth is that it's hard to make plans for 41. If One Pleasant goes forward, that's great, right? Then there'll have to be a whole lot of robust planning. If it doesn't, then we're still in the building, right? So there's, you know, and we've already been looking at things that have to be repaired. And you know, we did some much needed electrical upgrades in the historic structure in the auditorium, and dealt with some fire safety issues there. And we're going to continue to do that. If we're in the building, obviously, and if we're not in the building, we still have to do that. And some of the projects might be easier if people aren't in the building. Right? There might be able to be like a slower project of renovation than you could if there were people in the building.
No, you did in as much as you can right now. I just think, and I'm so sick of the word transparency, but I think in as much as we can be as clear as possible with the community in terms of, yes, 41 Highland is still there. Yes, there needs to be a plan. Yes, that might be 2 years down the road. Would you like to come help? You know, I just think you have to be really clear and at least acknowledge it. But I mean, I realize we don't know yet.
Glenn's already volunteered to be on a committee, so we're going to take him up on that tonight if he can. So, I mean, by the way, Michelle has joined us. I'm promoting her up into the panel here, so she can take some of the questions as well.
Let me. I see Mark and then Diane.
Sorry, Diane was first, so she can.
Very well.
Thanks. Really quick question. I noticed in the updated warrant that the CPC has voted to provide some affordable housing designated funds towards this project. I have a little bit of issue with that only because they're already on the, you know, I'd love to see this create new units. However, is that 1.3 or 1.4, whatever it is that they're recommending, is that something that will take that $10 million authorization down to 8.6?
Yes,
Is that
8.7. Yes, that's what it would do. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Mark.
just sharing some thoughts on 41 Highland Ave, you know, intimately involved with that. Yeah, if we were to, in theory, abandon the annex and take that down and just look at the historic portion, they are tied together now. The basement was opened up of the historic structure. It's not, you know, during the annex's addition, so it's sort of from a structural design, it is dependent on that foundation being there. So to just take that building down is a sizable project, because you not only have to address elevators up to the second floor of Old Town Hall, you're taking away the primary stair that serves Old Town Hall, and leaving yourself with one stairwell in the front that doesn't meet code in any way, shape, or form. So it's a pretty sizable bit of work over there, if that question comes up.
Okay. I think, you know, a lot of this are the problems associated with a late breaking opportunity as to a long-term planned out project. But they're all questions that need to be asked and considered. Any other?
Michelle has joined us, by the way. If there's any questions that anyone has that she might answer better, she's been much more intimately involved with the actual real estate transaction, and has really taken point on making and coordinating the use, right? Making this all work. So if I've answered incompletely, she could probably more completely answer. If she,
Michelle, if you like.
So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Mark?
Oh, no, sorry, that was my old hand.
Residual.
Sorry.
I think there was some questions earlier from Gene Estino about how a management company would work, Michelle, and I said that some of this we'll learn as we go, but in many respects, it's kind of just like a private sector management company. It's just a little different theme.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. So a private management company would come in and they would take care of everything from the maintenance of the units to the selection of the tenants, to managing the rent rolls coming in, and making sure they get to the proper accounts. So they do everything from cradle to grave.
All right. Okay. I mean, there are some other interesting considerations. You know, for example, one that some particularly bright person brought up at one of the forums was that by making that parcel into town hall, between the town hall parking lot and the MBTA related municipal parking lot next to it, what has become a very crowded parking situation in town on weekend evenings and weekends picks up something like 60 additional spaces, which you know, if we had if we had a chamber of commerce that was active, I suspect they'd be in here saying what a great idea this is. It also, you know, there are a lot of residual benefits of this, that and also, you know, the notion that it makes good use of that space, which you know, it's not really our business whether we've reached a point of commercial saturation or not, but I think having that space full, you know, and active and useful to the public is not a bad thing. That's just my opinion. Fran?
I had a talk with a building inspector recently, and one of the points I raised with, I don't know how many years ago, it was quite a few years ago, but we had major flooding down that area, Rupby Road and Smith Place. And I mean, there was a lot of water. So we looked at the elevation of this new building, and I said, I just want to be sure that all that area is low. It is all low area. That's where the railroad tracks are built, where the land wasn't good for anything else. They're all built in swamps, if you'll notice. So that comes along through there. Now, in the event that the James Brook gets clogged up with debris at the bulkhead there at Smith Place, and we have major flooding, might that building be in jeopardy? I think it's all right, but I think that's a question that could come up, and we need to have some ammunition to determine what the elevation that the building inspector said that we were 18 inches above grade there now. When the lumberyard was there, you had to walk up half a flight of stairs to get into the office area and to buy things. And that probably was due to the fact that railroad cars came in there and farmers backed their trucks in to load grain and hay and stuff too. But regardless, I think that the issue of flooding may come up, and we should be ready to answer it.
As I understand it, the site is in the 500-year floodplain. At least part of it is.
That's every 6 months then.
No. Hopefully it's not.
I was going to say, consider we get a 100-year storm twice a year. That said, the building itself is set, backing up a little bit. So there's very few areas in town that don't have some potential for something. That said, this is not in the whole village actually is in 100-year floodplain. So most of the village, I should say. So, but it is in a 500-year floodplain. That is true. That said, that does not require flood insurance for food.
I don't offer that as a negative comment from my viewpoint. I'm very much in favor of this whole project, but I think that we've got to be ready to answer questions that come in that vein.
Quite right. Mark, Maggie?
Yeah, real quick. And I don't like the guy that I'm pretending to be here. I'm just putting myself in the position of someone at town meeting that's going to ask a question that we may or may not be prepared for. And it's, why did this building become available to us and why didn't it sell already? If it's such a good deal, why did it fall into our lap?
Both excellent questions. Chris or Michelle are probably best positioned to answer that, but I think that's a critically important question, Mark. Go ahead.
So I'm happy to take that. So Mark, really this fell into our laps because we were looking for temporary space to house staff. We recently learned over the summer that our chillers were broken. The ACs weren't working in town hall. We were looking for temporary space in the event that we'd have to move. We identified 1 Pleasant Street as temporary space in the event that we needed to move if there was any additional failures at town hall. And as we were looking at the space, we developed a relationship with the owner and just investigated actually purchasing the building. So it never hit the market. The intent was for him to keep it and rent out commercial space on the first floor and manage the units on the second and third floor.
Great. That's awesome background and history. Again, similar to the police station issue, I think that just needs to be socialized as much as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Diane?
And just on that, I think it would be good if we could, Chris and Michelle, to get out like literally drawings, things of the building, of the site, maybe of the permits we have a PNS on the building, but it would be good for people that have been in the weeds on some of these other building projects in town to understand exactly what the site is, to answer those questions about whether it's in a floodplain. The culvert is nearby, and I remember having conversations about renovation of the town parking lot there, and there were all kinds of issues with the culvert that exists. I think it's closer up to North Main Street, but I think just kind of a site plan would be really helpful.
Sure.
Other than the 3D pictures I've seen.
Yep, and we can gather all that from the planning department. So we'll start pulling together that package. That's great feedback.
Mark, is your hand back up or is that a leftover?
Leftover, sorry.
Happened.
That culvert runs over between the, what's the town parking lot down there, which I still call the coal yard. So it doesn't run under the building, it runs west of the building. So then it runs straight across the town parking lot underneath the Hodges garage there, and then comes out at between by 15 Brook Street, and then it's sent back into the James Brook again.
Okay. Anything further on this? Then I'm gonna, just to keep with our agenda, I'm gonna ask for an update on the Fields, Parks, and Recreation. Mary, would you mind taking over for a minute? I've got to return a call real quick. I'll be right back.
No problem at all. Chris, are you the likely suspect, or are you under the hot seat, Michelle, for that?
I think that's likely me.
Okay.
So a quick update. So we've been socializing an entire package, which includes the Beechwood Playground, which is a complete renovation, rebuild of the playground. It includes the renovation and rebuild of the 6 tennis courts that are currently at Bancroft. It includes a sports/lacrosse wall and the Deer Hill field. As of, I believe it was Monday evening, the select board made the decision to pull the Deer Hill field from the package. And we move forward with CPC on the Beechwood Playground, the tennis courts, and the sports wall. Knowing the sports wall could only be funded $25,000 from CPC, that was the ask, even though the entire project is estimated at approximately $100,000. Due to the construction, CPC is only eligible to fund $25,000 of that. But CPC is recommending the tennis courts be renovated. For the tennis courts being renovated, all 6 courts, the new retaining wall, new fencing, drainage, the whole package there. They are also recommending the complete rebuild of the Beechwood Playground and the portion of the lacrosse/sports wall, which they can fund for a total package of $2 million.
Okay. Fran?
Yeah, the Beechwood Playground, are you talking about that enclosed area with the chain link fence around, or is it the entire ball field?
Nope, it's just the playground, the structures within the playground of that fenced area.
Okay.
I can add, though, that a few years ago, CPC did give money to Recreation to resurface the basketball courts there as well. So I think the idea now is, because we'll have the contractors in place, we'll do the project together and hopefully save some additional funding to get those basketball courts done at the same time.
Now, this lacrosse wall you're talking about for $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
This is a wall that the players, the athletes are going to wing their ball at, have a bounce back so they can catch it and do it again and again.
Mm-hmm.
That's an awful lot of money for a kind of a silly thing. Can't we put up a sheet of plywood and let them do? Obviously that isn't going to work, but $100,000 for something like that benefits only a few people, I think that's a little bit over the top.
So I can say for the sports wall, so the $100,000 is the estimate, and what's driving that price is primarily the turf surround. The wall itself and the earthwork isn't that expensive, and I know that the youth lacrosse organization has gone to USA Lacrosse and asked for funding. There's also some private funding coming in to help. The cast in place wall is about $18,000, and the additional earthwork is where we get up to the $25,000 to be funded. And really what this wall does is it allows players to play individually, and where it's going to be sited at Sawyer Street. The idea there is, if there are kids playing basketball, and there are people that, maybe want to work on their lacrosse game or their tennis game or soccer, it's almost like having an additional player to be able to retrieve the ball for you. So that's the idea behind it. There are many communities that have them.
Yeah.
And I'll say the idea that this is a a big number for a product that benefits only a small
I mean,
handful of people.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
they
what-
can hit
if I could
the
just-
ball
that's
against the
what
brick wall at the school.
If we could go one at a time, that'd be great.
Sorry.
That
Yeah.
argument is exactly what doomed town hall. And I know there's a bit of a generational divide in how products are funded in this town. And at times I feel like my membership on this community is myself spanning that divide, and it has landed me in hot water with people closer to my own age, but that's fine. I'm willing to accept that. I don't think this is that big of a number. It's a young town, a lot of young athletes. Yeah, I understand your concerns, Fran, but I also, the explanation of the cost makes sense to me. And I think this is something we need to pursue.
All right, all four of my kids were great athletes. I got one gold medalist, world champion, and my youngest son was a lacrosse player at Cohasset. They had a terrific year. He ended up being co-captain of the lacrosse team at University of New Hampshire. So I have sympathy for what these people need, but I just think that we got to draw the line somewhere. This is spending money that I don't think that could be
And
better.
I supported building town hall, but the line got drawn there because I think the overwhelming majority of the folks closer to my age thought I don't use town hall and we don't need this. And I supported town hall, but I'm just trying to look at things from both sides here.
No, I hear you. I just want you to let you know that I'm just some old fogey sitting in the corner that doesn't want to spend money.
I would never accuse you of that.
Well, you may be right. You never know.
Or if I did, I would do it to your face.
All right.
Diane, then Mary.
Yeah, just a question, Michelle, so with the recommendation from CPC for $2 million worth of funding, will there be an ask, and where will that fall outside of the CPC number for these projects? Question number one.
So that's a great question. And the way it's structured, we don't believe there will be an additional ask. We believe that the $2 million will cover the full cost of the tennis courts, the Beechwood Playground, as well as that $25,000 for the sports wall.
That's fantastic. I just to push on Franny a little bit, like the one thing that I'm a huge advocate for this project, and in particular the tennis courts, because that's one of the fields and courts, one of the rectangular recreational facilities that is created that anybody can show up at. Of any age, and arguing on the lacrosse wall, as Michelle said, like that's something a kid can just pop a ball against, or pop a tennis ball, or hit a soccer ball. So it's, even though it's called a lacrosse wall, it really, I think it's like, when your kids do stuff against your garage door and ruin them in perpetuity. So I think that that's good. And my only other question is, what happened to the softball field that was being proposed initially? Is that just a matter of kind of timing and more design work?
Can I just suggest putting that question on the shelf for just a second to see if there's anything further about the wall part? Mary, were you going to talk about walls? And
Yes, I was. I just have a question, Michelle. So is that going to be located in the field or near the field adjacent to the library then, on Sawyer?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
it is.
All right. And then I'm assuming the wall itself will probably outlive us all. And you say it's surrounded by turf?
Mhm. Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Great. Thank you.
for what it's worth, Fran, the wall at the Deer Hill that used to serve this purpose, my understanding is that the school department or facilities department got tired of watching the bricks needing repointing. So said, yeah, we're not going to use that wall anymore. So think of it as just pre-funding 100 years of pointing costs, and it all makes sense. It's all good. So Diane, I interrupted you. You were going to ask about softball fields.
No, just understanding if there was a reason for that, if that's something that's going to be forthcoming at another time.
Yeah. So as far as the softball field, there is a softball field currently there. And CYBSA, along with the high school, has done a great job in really manicuring that field and making it playable for the softball team. So really what this was just an additional improvement to it, which would have been adding field lights. So we're tabling it for now because what we're trying to figure out is, in the absence of another multi-purpose field, could we suit another field somewhere else that makes additional playing fields worthwhile in the town versus just adding a spruce up for $1.8 million to an existing area?
Okay. Anything further? Mark, your hand is up.
Was the spruce up just lights? Because you know, all politics is local. Calling that field playable is about the most generous use of that word. It's literally a gravel field, and I'm sure Fran has an anecdote about his children playing on broken glass, but that field is barely usable. We have a growing contingent of young female softball players in this town, and it's great to see. And they rarely share one field over at the large complex. And when in need, we can go to that Deer Hill field. But for anything but the absolute lowest levels of softball, playing a game on that Deer Hill field is just a non-starter. It's gravel. The ball hits the small pebbles and dies. It does not play like a softball field. It's a softball field in name only.
Yeah, so Mark, I think what we could do is, take this up at a future meeting, maybe annual town meeting, to see if there's funding to, assist in making that more playable. I think the feeling was with the Deer Hill entire proposal was that to make Deer Hill a multi-purpose field for the purposes of lacrosse and field hockey, with adding some touch-ups to the existing softball field, that the price tag just seemed overwhelming to many residents. So it was pulled and tabled for now. But I do anticipate that you will see something soon on that.
No, thanks for the explanation. I appreciate it. Just trying to understand the full scope of it. Okay.
No.
So I've got Mark, Mary, Fran. Cameron, I'm sorry.
So I support these. One question I have is, in these fields and courts, did the Milliken baseball field come up at all, and any enhancements to that, or is that part of the school in their budget, or where does that play into the equation?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So Milliken has primarily been recreationally managed, and then when there's needs at the baseball field, there's a partnership between the schools and the town to make sure that those enhancements are made. There's very vocal members of the baseball organization that want to make sure that field is maintained and maintained really well. So we've had an outside company coming in annually to maintain that field, to make sure it's playable and safe for all the athletes. And I'm talking about the baseball field in general.
Okay. But no real plans to just being up there on the soccer fields on the weekends, it seems like the dirt portion of the baseball field there is being overtaken by grass and weeds.
Yes, and you're right, it is, and it will every winter. And in the spring they'll cut it back, and they'll replace the pathways to the baselines, and they'll make that playable again. But I think it's just the nature of the beast that in the winter months, the resources to put forth to keep that maintained with no one playing on it isn't worth the effort, is what we're being told from outside vendors.
Gotcha.
Mary?
Yes, Michelle, has anybody, I don't know whose bucket this would go in, reached out to the Cohasset Sports Partnership in terms of helping out maybe with the sports wall as it relates to the turf end of it?
Mary, I don't have an answer for that. I know I've been working with Steve Rotundi on the sports wall, and he is the one that offered up. There's a Stu Curran fund that is there to help fund lacrosse related activities. And he has been working on trying to find other funding mechanisms. So I can certainly bring that up to him and see if there's an option there.
Okay. And I just got a text from a secret source saying that they will follow up as well. So,
Great.
that's good. There was, at least when we left the project for the, field at the high school, there were still monies in that fund. So it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars by any means, but there's still money there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Fran?
Yeah, one of the big problems we have in Cohasset is we just don't have enough open land to do a whole lot of this stuff. And obvious, I guess, I'm not an expert on softball, but I would assume that the softball field is a little smaller in dimension than a standard baseball field. Is that correct? Any of you baseball experts here?
Softball fields are gravel or dirt on the entire infield, not grass on the infield like a baseball field. So you can't use one for both. It's just a different dimension of playing.
Okay, so they're different. Now, has anybody looked in using a piece of the Beechwood ballpark for a softball field? It's a pretty good piece of land up there. I mean, you don't typically have two people playing at the same time, or at least you normally wouldn't. But that, I mean, that's another place to think about a softball field. And what I haven't been up to Milliken Field for a long time, but I don't know what's down the north end of the field. Are they using that for soccer now, or?
Yeah,
It's
so
mostly,
Milliken,
it's entirely soccer, other than the southwest corner is the baseball field that gets overgrown every offseason.
Right, yeah. Yeah,
and
we used to
Fran,
have a nice big vein of rotten stone up at the dump, but when we made this nice new transfer facility, that got covered up. So that was the rotten stone for the baseline for the bases. So, but anyway, yeah, I certainly appreciate the fact that you got to have more than one field. That I'm just thinking, is there anybody looked at Beechwood Ballpark to put in another on the other, the opposite end of it, a softball pitch?
so Fran, we did look at Beechwood. I'm not sure if we looked at it for a softball field or just a multi-purpose field, but I can look back at our notes and see, and certainly ask Activitas if that's an option for us. So
yeah,
I'll look into that.
All right, thanks, Michelle.
Sure.
Okay, Diane, and then Jean.
Yeah, I'm just going to take some privilege and just say that, I mean, this is an exact reason why I think we need to do a better job communicating amongst our constituencies in town, because, rec department and the school department and the individual sports, organizations. I know that we've come a long way over the past couple of years, but we should all be supporting each other to keep these fields, in as good shape as possible, and then reaching out to some of the private partnerships that we have in town, like the Cohasset Sports Partnership that Mary brought up. But yeah, I just feel like, I hope there's no disconnects, or I hope we're building more bridges to get some of these issues addressed.
Jean?
I just have an editorial comment on the discussion of the Beechwood ball field. That is not silly comparison, but it's kind of like some of the big major league teams think that Fenway isn't fair because it's smaller than some of the bigger places. I hear from some baseball, softball experts that field is not acceptable for anyone over middle school age. The field is short and it's just not built for more competitive sport. Like I said, just an editorial comment.
Okay. So, with respect to, why don't we can look at the warrant for a second? What are we looking at in terms of the rec issues in terms of voting? Are we looking in proposed Article 7 CPC item 4 as a $2 million aggregate approval for a a spend by the Community Preservation Committee. Am I correct? Chris?
That is the plan. That's an aggregate $2 million package.
Okay. So why don't we do this in this order? You know, we're a little behind, but not terribly behind our agenda. And at some point, you know, Mark drops off, and I'm conscious of that. I think it makes sense from a process standpoint to address, you know, we're presently have had conversations about, you know, excluded debt for two buildings and a CPC spend, which is sort of out of a different pot of money. We are going to be having conversations about the establishment of what are being referred to as special stabilization funds, but those are funded by, you know, creating tax revenue in excess of Prop 2.5 limit, which would require, you know, a vote different. You know, it's an override with features, is probably the best way to think of it. And I'm just going to assume that you all have some, you know, kind of working knowledge of what those proposals are, and that there are numbers that have been circulated in terms of being able to tell, you know, the voters and taxpayers what to expect based on their assessed value, the impact on them individually. And like I said, I think the putting them all out there at once is a response to the discussion concerning any given project going first being greeted by the, you know, the appropriate question, well, what else is there? So, you know, here it all is. So Chris, could you, I mean, we don't have, well, we do have Jennifer, but between you and Jennifer, can we talk a little bit about, and it's not just how much is it going to cost individual property owners, et cetera. That's a incredibly relevant question for each individual voter. But in the aggregate, and looking at a projection of the town's operational budget, and upcoming revenue sources, to the extent that those kinds of projections, you know, they have to be made. They're inherently somewhat speculative, I suppose all economic projections are. But and I know there's been a lot of work done. So this is a great question to ask and say, can you please tell me everything I need to know about this in the next 7.5 minutes? But how, in terms of, oh, I don't know, projected ability to pay, or the strain this would put, it's not going to put any strain on the budget because it all comes from outside the levy limit. So it's not playing a zero. None of these projects we've discussed play a zero-sum game with the items that live in the budget. In fact, the roads and streets proposal takes expenses out of the budget and puts them in a, you know, what's being called a special stabilization fund. So that's a long and objectionably leading question, but there are kind of concepts out there, and I'm sure people will have sharper follow-up questions. But you can kind of give us an overview and tee up a conversation, because I think this is the core of what the advisory committee does, is thinks big or bigger. So that said, what do you got?
Well, as you pointed out already, Rob, all of these requests fit within pre-existing, they're outside of the budget, right? The CPC is within the CPC world, which is a separately funded entity, and with his own separate revenue stream. And these four other requests are all funded, if voters approve them, by various exclusions. What they do is provide, I think, if they have any impact on the budget, you know, a better and a better acting, a safer and modern police and fire department will probably have less liability. And a better functional working space would hopefully improve working conditions and perhaps productivity. In terms of actual impact, there will be a small increase. There'll be an increase in utility costs because we'll have a 135 would effectively be a new building, right? So I don't know what that would be, but we'll have to project that out. But there's no new staff in any of these projections. The town has a AAA credit rating. So, the town is positioned to invest if the residents, voters so choose. I think the town is well positioned in the bond market and from a, financial foundation point of view. And I think, I don't know if Jennifer wants to add anything else to that. She's free to. Is that kind of?
I don't really have anything to add to that. I think if you want to look at the cost of the projects, it's in the long-term financial planning report. There's an executive summary in there, and there's also, we'll tell you the first year cost. You have the 2 debt exclusions, which would be borrowing, and then the special stabilization funds. I will say that what will hit the tax rate this year, or the tax levy, will be the 2 special stabilization funds. The borrowing won't hit the levy until next couple of years. So if you're going to purchase a building, that will hit probably the year after, probably pay some interest on that, but that will be incorporated over time.
So, I guess the relevant question is, looking down the line, Chris, at, operating costs, which are at least my estimation, overwhelmingly driven by labor cost and labor adjacent cost, like health care and health insurance and things like that. Plus revenue trends, plus projected new growth, including these buildings, to the extent they're currently paying taxes or are projected to be paying taxes, going offline, which is a hit to revenue. Are we confident, comfortable that we're able to continue to fund level service budgets in the foreseeable future, if that's the right metric?
The answer is yes, as far as we can see. I mean, things can change. Pandemic obviously changed. I managed through the Great Recession when things overnight changed. So we have a strong stabilization fund. We budget conservatively. I think that we're in a good, and over the next couple of years, I expect our new growth to be more robust than it has been in the last couple of years. We have the Quest Harbor partnership going up with the units down at the waterfront. The 390 CJC is now functionally, at least it's largely complete, though it hasn't been rented out, obviously, on the first floor that I'm aware of. So that was a big addition. There's another commercial project going up on 3A. Hingham Lumber's looking to do an expansion on 3A, which will add to our commercial base. Well, I think we're okay. I mean, every year is kind of a, if you look at the 5-year forecast, it always looks tight, and it is. That said, I think we always stretch a little bit and make things work. We are aggressively managing our medical expenses. I think we've done a really good job with that. We had a very hardworking member of the Maya Board Health Trust for a number of years, but now Grace is your board. So, and we've done, I think, and being part of a consortium like that has saved us a lot of money. It saved us insurance costs. It's saved us on property and casualty. It's saved us in workers' comp. We have the OPEB plan, right? So we actually have a funding plan which has helped us in terms of projected expenses over the future years, as we have a better discount rate on that, because we actually have a plan. And the pension costs are what they are. That'll all be paid off, we hope, in the next 10-ish years. And when that will lead to a nice, I think, ease on the budget. inflation, we'll have to see how that plays, right? I mean, we went with an inflation-free environment for a long time. When I say inflation-free, it was 2% or less, right? And we're back to a little more traditional numbers. We don't know how this is going to last, and inflation has not been consistent throughout the economy. Energy costs have spiked up and down and up and down, and that affects everything else, right? Energy transports everything. So, I think we continue to take steps to be economical. We just won 400 some odd $1,000 in grants yesterday for resiliency work around the Cove and the James Brook area and the sewer plant. I'm about to announce another grant for cybersecurity that we've won. We won a grant to help us plan the MBTA zoning challenges, to help us with that. We have an ADA grant that's out. We hope to get results on that in December, and if we do win that, we'll be close to $800,000 in various grant income in the last 6 months, which is helping us stretch and do things we otherwise wouldn't be able to do. So we're in very active management. I'm not even speaking to the schools. I know the schools do all of this stuff too, just in different buckets and pockets. So we're actively managing the resources to get the best value for the taxpayer, and following obviously the policy directives the town sets. It's not my policy directives, it's the policy directives the select board sets, you folks set, town meeting sets, and we continue to work in those directions. So do I think we're in good shape? Yes. Can I predict that we're going to be perfect? No, but I think we're in a good position to meet challenges as they present themselves.
Okay, Mary and Diane.
First, I just want an opportunity to say that the financial planning working group report is awesome. And thank you to all of you that put that together. It is really terrific, and golly, I hope people read it. But on another angle, so we're going to have, just in terms of looking forward, should these projects go through, there'll be an increase in just operating costs because we're going to own more real estate, right? Are we anticipating needing any more headcount with these properties coming online?
The short answer to that is no. There is no current plans for that. I mean, we've had ongoing conversations about, should we add a police officer to cut down on overtime, right? And we've had that conversation with fire. We've actually did that with fire, though we've never got to 24. We're trying to get to 24 for 3-4 years now. And that has shown, we actually have a force of 6. It does cut our overtime costs, but we have been able to consistently get to 4 groups of 6. Same thing with police, right? I think we're at a point again of, do we add another full-time officer to cut our overtime? And part of it is not just cutting overtime. You can only stretch people so far, right? We're a small department. So if you have a situation on a shift or a very unique, crime challenge, it can put a lot of strains on a small department. And, I think I know that the Chief Quigley is looking to apply for a grant when they become available again to see if we can't get another police officer online. But I think that a large chunk of that salary initially would be paid for by the grant, but I think would help with some overtime easing, quite frankly. So we're trying to be strategic on these things too. The other reality is that people don't stay with us the same length of time. And we've had a lot of people with us for really long periods of time. Lauren Lynn, amazing planner, right? 4 years. And there are others, and it's not that she didn't like us. It's just, she went on to next chapter of her career. I think we're going to see more of those kinds of folks as the generational approach to work changes. So I do think that will have an impact on our OPEB expense long term. I don't know if I even answered your question. I hope I did.
Yes, and because I do think that's going to come up on town meeting floor, especially if anybody did pay attention just to the FTE trend. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the FTEs on our side were library and public safety pretty much. And we upgraded 2 part-time positions at the library to full-time over time. And then we added 2 firemen and a police officer over the last 5 years. And I think it's worked out okay. The schools I can't speak to. I know they've had a little bit more aggressive growth, but I know they've had other challenges. So.
Thank you.
Diane?
Yep. My question is just really about revenue, and I know we have a good certified free cash again for this year. And is there other money that we can put towards some of these proposed projects? I'm thinking like we haven't talked about the stabilization fund in great detail tonight. So maybe I'll push this question off for another meeting, but is there still ARPA money? Are there still, which are for one-time costs, or, is there excess free cash where we can be lessening the burden of all of these projects should they all pass? Because, our taxes are all going up anyway because our assessments are going up. I mean, and that's where eventually when you get people to town meeting, it's going to be, what's the impact on me? And if, and it's very well presented in the financial planning document, but that's on top of incremental costs that you get with any kind of reassessment, with any kind of moving around of the pieces of the levy. So I just wonder if there's any way we can, bring some of these proposed costs down.
So the facility, the school study, it's going to be funded fully from free cash. So that's not an ask. That's $400,000. That's the current estimate on that. We're going to aggressively seek grants for the public safety facility, particularly the emergency management aspect of it. Hingham did win, I believe, some substantial cash for theirs. And I'd like to do that as well for ours. I mean, I'm not looking for, I'm looking for as large amount of money as we can get our hands on. So we're going to aggressively seek money for emergency management purposes and police and fire equipment with any grants that are available over the next 12, 18, 24 months, which I hope will bring down the cost of the fire station and police station, or at the very least, supplement it in a way that we otherwise wouldn't be able to afford. And we'll see how that works. There really aren't, unfortunately, any public funds for a town hall. They just don't exist. Not for the office space, at least. The school, we aggressively pursued funds, and the state has been a little tiny bit more generous the last couple of years with supplemental Chapter 90 money for roads. So that just helps us get ahead of the game a little faster. And we'll see over the next couple of years where that goes. I mean, if we end up in a better place, the select board will look as the policy that's been kicked around for all of you to look at. The states, they'll look at it annually, and and with the schools, I mean, there's a backlog of work that has to be done there. I think that's pretty clear. And so the free cash that we generate, a big chunk of that, we're recommending go into capital. We're recommending $500,000 go into the capital reserve, the capital stabilization fund, and that's more money that's available in the spring, right? And it can also cut on potential borrowing costs. So I think we're trying to be as aggressive as we can, and the free cash gets spent on these kinds of things, so we don't have to borrow. So we can get better equipment that cuts costs. At some point, we have to upgrade our financial system, for example, right? The software we use really just need to upgrade it. That might be a free cash ask in a year or two, right? To fund Munis or something like that, which would just make us more productive. So we are looking there.
Okay, so I think that brings us to a point where I'd like to ask if we're comfortable doing some voting. It's what we do. At a minimum, if everybody can take a look at the warrant that Chris circulated earlier, maybe a quick march through the routine articles, and then while we're doing that, give some thought to whether we're in a position to vote on either the building debt exclusions and or the CPC part, bearing in mind that formally speaking, we should vote all of these things not later than our next meeting on October 11, because that's the last day on which we can take any action that'll be printed on the warrant. And I think our value as giving advice to town meeting, really, I think, with the exception of things we just can't get to adequately, in this case, I think it's the zoning articles, we really should have our recommendation on the face of the warrant. That's the best practice anyhow. So maybe we're comfortable voting some things tonight, or maybe we just have a vote-a-palooza next week. But I think that's all TBD. Why don't we, unless anybody has another thought, which I'm always open to, take Articles 1 through 4 in kind of a quick series, and then regroup and see what we want to do next. Is that good for everybody? Hearing no
I'll probably have
dissent.
to jump after that. Sorry.
Say that, Mark.
I'll probably
Again?
have to jump after that. I can hang for these 4, but I'll probably then have to go. Sorry.
Okay, that may affect our calculus on what we want to do
And I
about
don't mean
voting
to be
the
the
other
one
ones.
that's controlling the determination of the outcome of this meeting, but I'm bumping up against the hardest of
Tens,
deadlines here.
tens of millions of dollars turn on your on
The
on
hardest
your
of deadlines with 2
obligations
folks
as a
that need to go
parent.
to
Oh,
bed.
yeah, I know what you mean. So, all right, Article 1, Chris, what's the 15-second version of this, or does that not do it justice? Hello? You're muted. There you are.
Sorry, my computer's being very slow and I try to get out of mute here. Yeah, it just it's 3 amendments to the budget. One to pay the cable money to 143 TV. One to help supplement expenses at the RTF, which has been a bit of a challenge. And the third is for water, and it's coming out of water retained earnings to go into system maintenance for some additional expenses they have had this year.
Diane?
Just a procedural question on the water retained earnings expend. Is that something the water department voted on?
Yes, they did. They made that request.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
I'm sure it's on the warrant.
All right, the way we usually do this is I'll propose the text of a motion, and if somebody wants to move it, we'll do the thing and move second. And we have sort of a formulaic way of doing it to make sure that the record is clear. Give me a second to finish writing down the formula. Good. All right. So I think the appropriate motion would be, does the advisory committee recommend that special town meeting approve Article 1, amendments to the fiscal year 2024 operating budget in the form it appears in the draft warrant dated October 4, 2023?
I'll move it.
Moved?
Second.
Jean? Second, Diane. Discussion? Hearing none, we have to vote by roll call. So, Gina Stino.
Aye.
Mike can't, well, I think he's dropped. I think he's on an airplane at this point. Mark Cameron.
Aye.
Fran Collins.
Aye.
Diane Kennedy.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Mark Maggi still with us.
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick.
Aye.
Meg Wheeler.
Aye.
Rob Hillman, I too am an aye. Voted 8-0 in favor. Moving on to Article 2, unpaid bills from prior fiscal years.
There's unless
Are there
Jennifer found one in the last 24 hours, the answer is no. We don't have any.
Well, then I don't think we have anything to recommend.
We
So,
don't. Yes, we
yeah,
do.
so,
Move on.
so we will elide Article 2, which brings us to Article 3, stabilization funds. And these are these two appropriations. Chris, do you want to address them for a moment?
So the first one is following the OPEB policy. This is the annual contribution in the fall. The additional one is made in this as part of the budget process. So that was already approved. It would bring the contribution to somewhere north of $500,000 this year. But this 350 has been in the policy for a few years. The other money, again, the first, the financial policy, the fiscal policies say free cash. There's a list of places to go, and one of them is, as a first priority, is capital stabilization. So that's a recommendation of about $500,000 into capital stabilization. We would, on this warrant, we'll spend about $1.5 million in free cash. That's what this warrant spends.
Out of how much?
The certification came through today at 2.4. So, and thank you, Jennifer, for taking care of that. It was very speedy. I'm recommending we hold on to the rest of it till the spring, because we probably will need it for something.
Okay. You answered my question. Does anybody have any other preliminary questions for Chris? Then would accept a motion that does the advisory committee recommend that special town meeting approve Article 3 stabilization funds in the form it appears in the draft warrant dated October 4, 2023?
Move it.
Jean, second.
Second.
Fran, okay. Further discussion? None? Okay. Vote by roll call. Gina Stino.
Stino, aye.
Mark Cameron.
Mark Cameron, aye.
Fran Collins.
Aye.
Diane Kennedy.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Mark Maggi.
Mark Maggi, aye.
Mary McGoldrick.
Aye.
Meg Wheeler.
Aye.
And Rob Hillman, I too am an aye. All right. Moving on to Article 4, allocation of funds for one-time costs. Chris, I think we've touched on these at an earlier meeting. Rather than going through a discussion of any of them, why don't we see if anybody in the committee well, there are a couple of us. Well, there's one of us on this call who wasn't on the committee at that point. Mark, do you have any questions about these 4 items?
No.
Does anybody else have questions for Chris? They're pretty self-evident. So
The only clarification I'll make for you is that the money for the Beechwood ADA accessibility would be unnecessary if the CPC project is supported. So the motion we're going to try to draft so that if the CPC is approved, then that will be unnecessary. But if it's not approved, we do have to do those mats.
So that money would flow back into free cash?
Correct.
Got it. Diane, I saw your hand.
Yeah, quick question on the allocation of the opioid settlement money to public health. Chris, how much does any of that help fund Safe Harbor?
Well, that's actually, I think most of it is going to be directed through Safe Harbor. So what we have to do is we have to pull it out. This is what we've gotten over the last 2 years. This is the equivalent amount of free cash being pulled out, put into an article so we can spend it and then track the spending of it for the purposes. I thought there's been some programs discussed. We've had a little bit of a turnover in the Safe Harbor administration. So, but this money has to go to very specific purposes.
Okay. Further questions? So then we need a motion. Does the advisory committee recommend that special town meeting approve Article 4, allocation of funds for one-time costs in the form it appears in the draft warrant dated October 4, 2023?
So moved.
Fran, second.
Second.
Jean, discussion? None. Roll call vote. Gina Stino.
Stino, aye.
Mark Cameron.
Mark Cameron, aye.
Fran Collins,
Aye.
Diane Kennedy,
Diane Kennedy, I.
Mark Maggi,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick,
Aye.
Meg Wheeler,
Aye.
and Rob Hillman. I too am an I. All right. So we have in front of us a CPC set of articles that was just approved the other night, right? Chris? Can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm trying to, yes, the answer is yes. They voted, I was at the meeting on Monday when they voted the recreation package, but they voted on the other ones and we talked through them that night. So these are the votes that they've taken.
Okay, I have a couple of process questions and I'll see what the committee wants to do. Of these four matters, we have discussed two of them in some detail, having to do with numbers 3 and 4. We haven't talked at all about the library or the housing authority repairs. On the one hand, I generally think, you know, if it's CPC's money to allocate, unless there's something wildly irrational about it, we've usually you know, passed on it without comment. So we have three things we could do. We could defer the whole thing till next week. We could vote the two that we've discussed, or with a moment for questions on the other two, we could vote the whole thing. So in no particular parliamentary order, does anybody have a preference? I'm going to go with let's vote the whole thing and let somebody claw it back from there if they're uncomfortable with that. And I'm perfectly happy to be corrected. So, no, we're good. All right, Chris, can we have just so we make a record, the quick version of what is up at the Pratt and the Housing Authority with respect to what those funds are going to do?
So there are cabinets that store historical documents. I don't know if they're themselves historical, but they're part of the storage of historical documents. That's what the $8,000 will replace. That's in the history room. You know, it's kind of in the backside of the library. And then the community housing, that's $87,878 for various critical repairs. I don't know if I'm honestly, I know what stairwells and ceilings are. I'm not quite sure what bridges are in the context of the housing authority. But I know it's all for, it's for important work for the structures. So.
Okay.
I think it's talking about the other two, so I'll leave those alone.
Okay, so before I sort of dictate a potential motion, does anybody have any questions or comments? Hearing none, I will ask for a motion reading, does the advisory committee recommend the special town meeting approve Article 7, Community Preservation Committee expenditures or appropriations, I guess is the right word, in the form it appears in the draft warrant dated October 4, 2023. Motion? Anybody?
So moved.
Fran, thank you. Second?
Second.
Diane, who was that? Mary, thank you. Discussion. Roll call vote. Gina Stino.
Gina Stino, aye.
Mark Cameron.
Mark Cameron, aye.
Fran Collins.
Aye.
Diane Kennedy.
Diane Kennedy, I.
Mark Maggi.
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick.
Aye.
Meg Wheeler.
Aye.
And Rob Hillman. I too am an I. So the next, just scrolling through this, the next two up are Town Hall and Police and Fire. So again, I ask the question, do we feel like these questions are ripe before we even go to a motion, Diane?
So just my comment, I'm only comfortable voting on one of them. And because the because the select board, I mean, they've already signed PNSs on both of them, so I don't know that our recommendation tonight would influence or impact their decision, their voting tomorrow night. So I would feel more comfortable if we deferred the votes for, as you mentioned, a Votapalooza next week, but that's my personal opinion.
Which one are you comfortable voting?
The police and fire.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm, well, you know, I hear your comment being, I think you're completely right. If we said something that affected a board who signed PNSs for these buildings, do something different, we'd have to be awfully persuasive. I'm a big believer in voting for one of them just to get that much off our docket for next week. Is everybody okay with voting on the police and fire station? Mark?
Yes.
So
Yeah, I'll do it, and then I'm gone for the night. Sorry, folks.
Okay, wrong Mark. But no, you're the right Mark. Mark, you're both the right Mark. But Mark Cameron was one with
Always
his
the
hand
wrong.
up. So, but yeah, let's thank you for hanging on. If we're going to do it, we'll do it. Mark.
I guess
Cameron?
quick question on the follow-up for town hall. Are there any programming that's in the current town hall that wouldn't be moving over to One Pleasant?
No.
Everybody, there's some odd departments because it's not going to be programmed as we designed as our most recent project, right?
No,
So
it's
like,
like, there's no additional space, like Safe Harbor does not move into town hall, it stays in the library, right?
and the archivist, all that stuff, there's not going to be some rogue individual that's left over at Highland.
Well, there is no, the archive does not move. I mean, so there is no physical, and we have to find a new home for the archive eventually. It's one of the longer term things. It doesn't fit in the building. There's no basement here. So the vaults will be there, but those are going to be more for operational purposes. So the archive will have to find a new home, and we just don't have that yet. But other than that, everything else stays.
And then the one question I think I still had remaining on police and fire was it doesn't seem like there's really any money associated with renovations to Elm Street. And I would just be cautious in that, you know, if we're asking the voters for a sizable amount of money for police and fire and public safety, that we're not putting a new roof on the building at Elm Street. And if there's minor paint and touch and some facilities work that can be done inside, I see that as secondary. But for major infrastructure and envelope issues that may exist on Elm Street, if we don't include them in part of this ask, that seems like it could be problematic down the road.
So I'll answer by saying, as far as I am aware, the predominant amount of work to be done on Elm Street is within the scope of the facilities department. The roofs have been repaired over the last few years. I mean, there are challenges in the building, don't get me wrong. That said, the real, the fire side is newer. I mean, that those bays were redone in the last 20 years, I believe. The main station is, 70 or 60 plus years old. So there's definitely some work to be done. That, as I understand it, though, a lot of the retrofitting is something that can be done within the scope of the existing structure with the team that we have. That said, if there's going to be anything bigger, like if they have to get some new equipment for decontamination or something like that, I think that's planned to be incorporated into the ask, Mark, if that helps your answer.
Okay.
Mary?
Yeah, quick question, Chris. I thought you had indicated that the IT department was still staying in the basement at 41 Highland?
No, there's actually space. The space carved out. They were able to get room into One Pleasant.
Terrific.
They may keep their space in the basement of 41 Highland just because they may keep it, because IT loves to spread out. So, but there's enough room to have not only office space but also back office space at One Pleasant.
Okay, thank you.
So that said, are we, sounds like we're okay for a motion on Fran?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure why Diane is reluctant to vote on the town hall issue. It seems that we've all talked about it at length, and we've all seemed to be pretty much in agreement with it, that the selectmen have entered it with a PNS, Also in the PNS and the fire, I'm not quite sure what the difference is, and I don't know why we can't vote on both of them tonight. Maybe there's a reason, something escaped me, but
If I may, my reluctance on the town hall is just per our earlier conversation about my reluctance on the housing units and the management of that. And we talked earlier in the meeting about the select board having a meeting with the Affordable Housing Steering Committee, Affordable Housing Trust. I would feel, having sat on the Affordable Housing Trust for a number of years, I would feel much more comfortable knowing that that conversation took place with those kind of content experts, especially the steering committee that has been running the housing production plan for the number of years. So I would just feel more comfortable kind of knowing a little more about what their thoughts are on this, just because of my reluctance on the housing. That's it. But you know, if the majority wants to vote, vote.
Well, my view is if it were next week, I would say, yeah, we need to vote on this. Let's do it. If, you know, I think that unless somebody, you know, if it's a matter of I'd like more information so I can make an informed vote, you know, I think to the extent we can achieve unanimity on this, it would be good. If
good enough. I'm okay with it.
I figured, and at a committee, ITY, not EDY, committee, to any of our members, I'd rather, you know, accommodate that than not. So let's vote police and fire, and then we'll move on. So I would be happy to have a motion that in the form of, does the advisory committee recommend that special town meeting approve Article 9, police and fire, as in the form that it appears in the draft warrant dated October 4, 2023.
So moved.
Jean, second.
Second.
Mary, discussion? Roll call vote. Gina Stino,
Gina Stino, aye.
Mark Cameron,
Mark Cameron, aye.
Fran Collins,
Aye.
Diane Kennedy,
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Mark Maggi,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick,
Aye.
Meg Wheeler,
Aye.
Rob Hillman is an aye. I think then we have voted on everything that we are going to vote on the warrant. Yeah, we can let the cemetery regulations roll, I think. Mark, I think we've probably overstayed your welcome. So thanks for staying through the substantive stuff. We have a couple of procedural things to do, and then we'll reconvene next Wednesday night.
I appreciate it, folks. I'll see you next week. Thanks again.
Thank you. We have minutes. At the beginning of the meeting, I distributed an email with 4 sets of minutes in it that were revised. One of them they go back to the spring, but just what was in them and why they're a little bit different from ones you saw previously. I was able to get the text from Mary of some of minutes to one of the meetings in the spring. I was able to get the text of minutes of our meeting on the 20th from Fran, and I just put them in the format that we typically use. And then there were minutes of a brief meeting that we ran just prior to annual town meeting, at which there was no substantive business conducted, but we did open and close a meeting. So it is but right that we approve minutes of that. And then we just got a set of minutes from our note taker, which has been provided to us, unburdening any of us from creating these minutes. And those are available to approve. So if folks are comfortable with it, we can go down through those 4 and vote them, and get ourselves caught up and compliant. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I think the first motion. Well, go ahead.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. Just a quick question. There's one thing that needs to be changed in one of the minutes. Do you want me to wait till we get to those?
Yeah, let's get, we'll do, I think we have to do them one at a time. So
Okay.
when we move those minutes, propose the change, we'll
Okay.
make the change.
Thank you.
So I numbered them and in chronological order to make it a little bit easier. So the first set of minutes are for Wednesday, April 26, 2023. Those are in a PDF file. Can I have a motion to approve them, subject to discussion?
Sorry, so moved.
Jean, second.
Second.
Mary, does anybody have any discussion? Then we'll do a roll call vote. Meg, I think probably when we get to the one that you want to change in, let's change it before we move it so that we're not amending or whatever you're supposed to Robert's rules it somehow. So, but this one we have a motion in a second, roll call vote. Gina Stino.
Aye.
Mark Cameron.
Abstain.
Fran Collins.
Aye.
Diane Kennedy.
Abstain.
Mark Maggi. He's no longer not with us right now. Mary McGoldrick.
Aye.
Meg Wheeler.
Abstain.
And Rob Hillman, I too am an I. Which brings us to the minutes of. This is the meeting just prior to the town meeting. And I see a mistake in it already. So does anybody have any changes to this before we move it? Okay, for the record, the time should be 6:30 on the caption. The time is correct in the minutes. It's wrong in the caption. So with that change made, can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Fran. Second?
Second.
Jean, thank you. Discussion? Hearing none. Gina Stino.
Aye.
Mark Cameron.
Abstain.
Fran Collins.
Aye.
Diane Kennedy.
Abstain.
Mary McGoldrick.
Aye.
Meg Wheeler.
Aye.
And Rob Hillman is an aye. All right, now that gets us to number 3. Oh, there are 5. Goodness.
So Rob, this is the one.
Okay,
Oh,
give me
no,
a
this is
second.
not the one. Never mind. Ignore me.
Did I do something? My capacity to do something wrong with these sorts of things is pretty much endless. So I think the next set of minutes is the minutes of the Wednesday, the September 20 meeting. That's what I have next. And these are not the ones that need to be corrected, Meg?
Well, now I'm actually confused. Why do we have 2 sets for that day? Am I seeing things?
We have 2 sets for those days because I did something wrong. It was I sent 2 copies of it because I was trying to do it. I just got the document in front of me while we were starting the meeting. I was trying to multitask. So the minutes that are before us to be considered and approved are those for Wednesday, September 20, 2023. Does everybody have those?
So that is the one for the change. It doesn't
Yes.
list me at all, and I was present. I just
Oh,
was
okay.
sick in bed off camera, but I was there.
That's right. All right. Well, then we'll amend these by adding Meg Wheeler. I remember. Thank you for for being there. So as with that change noted, the motion to approve.
So moved.
Mary, second.
Second.
Vote, Fran, vote by roll call. Gina Stino.
Aye.
Mark Cameron.
Abstain.
Fran Collins.
Aye.
Diane Kennedy.
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick.
Aye.
Meg Wheeler.
Aye.
And Rob Hillman is an aye. So that lastly brings us to are September 24th, very nicely formatted, professional looking minutes. Um,
Rob, I think the date's
to
wrong,
which I have a change. Yes, I think
unless
it
I'm
is.
losing it again.
Oh, it'd be a Wednesday. It would be last Wednesday, which is the 27th, correct?
You named the file correctly. It's just the.
Yeah,
actual
but the,
dates.
yeah, the minutes, that was in the minute. I should have just made the change to the minutes, but I just incorporated them. So change number one is it should be September 27. The other issue is 2, 3, 4, 5, is that neither Mark, Cameron, nor Mike were members as of the date of that meeting. So there should be a change, making it perhaps just listed as also, put them in also attending, just so that it's clear that they were there, which is important, but they were not voting members at the time. So with those two changes, does anybody have anything else? Hearing none, somebody want to move these minutes with those changes mentioned?
So moved.
Diane, a second.
Second,
Jean, discussion? Roll call vote. Jean Estino,
aye.
Mark Cameron,
Abstain.
Fran Collins.
Aye.
Diane Kennedy.
Lee and Tina, they're fantastic minutes.
Yeah, second that. Mary McGoldrick,
Abstain.
Meg Wheeler,
Aye.
and Rob Hillman is an aye. So we have done our duty with respect to the open meeting law. Go ahead.
Sorry, Rob, one quick question. So we
Yeah.
still, the only ones outstanding are July 12th still then?
That's where I think I made a mistake.
I think it was in your
I-
header, but it wasn't in the body of the email.
It was the July minutes. Yeah, didn't. I saved a document over another document. I'm gonna have to fish those out and I'll do them next week, Mary. Sorry.
Oh, God, no biggie.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what that's why Meg pointed out, we have two documents that are the same. It's just I saved a document wrong. So I'm not gonna go email things around at 9:40. We can bang it out next week in a minute. It wouldn't be a meeting if I didn't make some colossal blunder with something super basic. So
Hardly colossal, Rob.
so okay. So let's see, topics for upcoming meetings. We're going to finish as much as warrant as we can, and then we're going to move on to zoning in the weeks between next week and town meeting, so we can give it due attention. I'll send out links to the various meetings and hearings. I've been watching them. It's pretty gripping stuff, but I don't want to, no, strike that. I don't make light of it. This is serious, and it deserves our attention. A lot of it is, grindingly technical, but we need to have opinions about it because people will surely have opinions about it on town meeting floor. So I think perhaps a little bit more fly specking than is our norm is probably the way to go. Diane, are
Well,
you?
just really quickly on the July 12th minutes, I took them and I sent them to you on like July 13th. So I have them. I just found them. I'm going to send them to you. They're clean. We'll do them next week.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm sure I could have found them someplace, but thanks an awful lot. That's great. Okay, so we know what we're up to next week and thereafter. There are no topics I did not reasonably anticipate within 48 hours. So therefore, we will entertain a motion to adjourn. Please.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Jane, second. Fran, discussion none. Roll call vote. Jean Estino,
Aye.
Mark Cameron,
Aye.
Fran Collins,
Aye.
Diane Kennedy,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick,
Aye.
Meg Wheeler,
Aye.
Rob Hillman. I too am an aye. Thank you. A long meeting for us, but action-packed and productive. So we'll resume next week, and I'll get you materials ahead of time and get it posted and all those good type things. So have a good night.
All right.
Thanks,
Good
guys.
night.
Night.
Mark, did you? Oh,
Mark has a
Mark
question.
Cameron was your you have a
No,
question?
I hit it by accident. Sorry.
Oh, quite all right.